Governor Cuomo did indeed track COVID deaths in nursing homes. Baylor claims the crown. The UK variant has arrived, and China is attempting to brainwash Christians. This is the April 10th report. Welcome to the Newsbrief podcast. I am your host, Isaac Lopez, and this show is presented by TLG Radio. Stick around for the brief breakdown where we will work through the report on our Christian brothers in China. On politics, the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, reportedly tracked the coronavirus deaths located in nursing homes despite saying that he didn't know exact numbers on other occasions. According to New York Times, officials removed thousands of deaths prior to reports being made public. The Department of Homeland Security was authorized by the Biden administration to continue building the wall that the Trump administration began constructing. The press secretary reported that there is some limited construction that has been funded and allocated for, but it is otherwise paused. President Biden introduced 6 initiatives on Thursday for gun control, saying gun violence in this country is an epidemic. Let me say it again, gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment. Notably, require the seller and manufacturers that make these key parts to make them with serial numbers and run background checks on the buyers when they walk in to buy that package. For more on this gun control legislature, follow the link in the research document. From the White House, President Biden will today issue an executive order forming the Presidential Commission on the Supreme Court of the United States, comprised of a bipartisan group of experts on the court and the court reform debate. The commission's purpose is to provide an analysis of the principal arguments in the contemporary public debate for and against Supreme Court reform, including an appraisal of the merits and legality of particular reform proposals. On to sports. The Baylor Bears ended the bid for an undefeated season by the Gonzaga Bulldogs in the NCAA championship. They become only the second Texas college basketball team to win a national title. Following the April 2nd report, Major League Baseball pulled their All-Star game from Georgia, moving it to Colorado. This potentially cost the surrounding area of Atlanta nearly $100 million in tourism profits. On to health. Following up on the report that a production facility of the vaccine had to dump 15 million doses, this was apparently flagged by the Trump administration in the summer for lacking enough trained staff and had a record of problems with quality control. The variant strain of the coronavirus that was initially found in the United Kingdom has arrived on the shores of the United States in force. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky said Wednesday, based on our most recent estimates from the CDC surveillance, the B.1.1.7 variant is now the most common lineage circulating in the United States. According to the New York Times, a set of regulators of the vaccine think that there might be a potential link between the AstraZeneca vaccine and blood clots. Follow the link in the document for the research for the New York Times story. On to culture. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey signed into legislation protection from any new federal gun laws that might violate the Second Amendment. This from the Epoch Times. Proponents of the bill have argued that it would ensure that the rights of gun owners are protected from what they have described as potential overreach by the federal government, while critics say that the law will undermine cooperation between Arizona law enforcement and federal officials. Radio Free Asia reported that Chinese officials are detaining Christians in windowless rooms as they attempt to convince them to renounce their faith. More on this in the brief breakdown. And finally, some good news. A man attacked a woman in Michigan City, Indiana, stabbing her multiple times. When the police arrived on the scene, they found both the victim and the attacker on the ground, wounded, as a group of people stopped him prior to police getting there. Both the attacker and victim were rushed to the hospital. This from the Epoch Times, Robert Bob Van Sumeren of Michigan was sworn in as a lawyer by Judge Michael Smith in winter of 2019. 2 decades previously, he had been sentenced to up to 20 years in prison for bank robbery by the very same judge. Talk about a turnaround. You can read more on that at the Epoch Times. If you want to drop a tip, email me at thebriefnewsbrief@gmail.com. If you want to hear more of a deeper dive on it and you would like that to be covered in the brief breakdown, email me there. Also, if you want more reporting from other reporters who share a similar vision as myself, stick around for the Life Given News, a site dedicated to reporting in succinct and honest ways. If you're interested in writing for TLG, reach out to me at thebriefnewsbrief@gmail.com. Follow me on social media to see what else I'm up to, but if not, stick around for this podcast. Give this podcast and radio channel a follow wherever you find TLG Radio, so that way you can stay up to date with new and exciting content that we are rolling out weekly. In conclusion, remember who the real enemy is. Ephesians 6:12. God bless, and I will speak with you either next Friday or in a moment in the brief breakdown. Last week we discussed, and I will be trademarking that word eventually, we discussed what the news cycle can become when it devolves into someone giving a hot take, and that is the breaking news. I wanted to push on that further today, and I think there's an unhealthy hatred that can stem from that. If you feed off of the headlines and slant that the majority of the media is pushing you, what are you allowing to breed in your heart? Is your involvement in current events fueled by anger and hatred of the other side, whichever that side may be? Or is it inspired by the light and goodness of Christ? The hope for this podcast is to create and generate interesting stories that will spark further investigation on your own time instead of jumping from one hot take to the next. Rather, doing the legwork yourself and figuring out what really is the stories that matter. What really are the stories that matter. Anyway, just a further thought from last week's brief breakdown. Before we get too far into the brief breakdown, I just want to let you know that we are going to go in depth a bit on the Radio Free Asia story about brainwashing Christians, and it's a little difficult to stomach. So just a heads up. This one, though, I think I'm just like we did last week, reading through the report and reading it on air instead of just pulling out, hot takes from one quote, right? And that's really easy to do. So authorities in China, this is straight from the report on Radio Free Asia. Authorities in Asia are detaining Christians in secretive mobile transformation facilities to make them renounce their faith. A member of a Christian house church in the southwestern province of Sichuan, who asked to be identified by pseudonym Li Yuiz, said he was held in a facility run by the ruling Chinese Communist Party's United Front Work Department, working in tandem with the state security police for 10 months after a raid on his church in 2018. So Lee went on to say it was a mobile facility. This is where he was being held. And that could just set up in some basement anywhere, somewhere. It was staffed by people from several different government departments. And it had its own CCP, political and legal committee working group, and they mainly targeted Christians who are members of house churches. CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, this is Radio Free Asia's note here. The CCP embraces atheism, exercises tight controls over any form of religious practice among its citizens. And I would defer to them. I don't know really the state of religious liberties in Asia and specifically in China. I know they're very strict, but I would be willing to default to what this article is saying. And state security, police, and religious affairs bureau officials frequently raid unofficial house churches that aren't backed by the CCP and the Three Self-Patriotic Association, although those member churches have been targeted as well. So The CCP under Xi Jinping regards Christianity as a dangerous foreign import, which party documents warning against the infiltration of Western hostile forces in the form of religion. That from the report. So basically, what they're doing is that the CCP is targeting Christianity because they see it as a carrier for Western ideology, and that is dangerous to their society. And so Lee said that he was held in a windowless room for nearly 10 months, during which time he was beaten, verbally abused, and mentally tortured by staff. This article culminates in what the article writes as basement brainwashing sessions. And this is where they would carry out the brainwashing methods on them in this detention center, in this secret location in a basement. And he said that Lee would go on to say that there were no windows, no ventilation, and no time allowed outside. He was just given 2 meals a day, which were brought to the room by a designated person. Inmates who refused to admit their mistakes were apparently held in solitary confinement for prolonged periods. He goes on to say there is no time limit for the brainwashing process. I don't know the longest time anyone has been held there, but I was detained for 8 or 9 months. You can't see the sun, so you lose all concept of time. He goes on to say that I couldn't sleep. After you've been in there for a week, death starts to look better than staying there. And he apparently was drugged so that way he would wake up because he would be so exhausted. He said, one time in there I was groggy and was trying to open my eyes, but I couldn't. 4 or 5 of them grabbed me by the arms and legs and pinned me to the ground and then administered a drug which brought him back to consciousness. And that's where I'm going to actually end the report. And as abrupt as it may sound, I think that this story is a really good reminder of the state of the church in other places, and really to keep it in our prayers. There are a lot of things that happen outside of the U.S. that are not covered by major news outlets and that pass under the radar. And I don't think it really fits the overall narrative. And I don't even want to get into discussing narratives, but it is very noticeable that is underreported. So I think that at the very least, keep them in your prayers. Let me know what you think. Reach out to me. If you'd like to hear more about the story, I can do some more digging. I'm sure there are other reports out there based around this. Remember, and I think this is actually a great lead out for our close, remember who the real enemy is. Don't get too caught up in party politics. Ephesians 6:12. God bless, and I will speak with you next Friday.